Only dictatorial systems are transitive, unanimous, anonymous, and independent of irrelevant alternatives. So whether it's majority rule, plurality rule, ranking system, what have you, doesn't matter. It is what it is, all right? If you're interested. This has nothing to do with finance, but it affects life. Let's pause. All right, let's continue. We will talk about profitability index. This is the ratio of the present value of future cash flows to the cost of project. We can write it as a function of NPV. If you think about it, NPV is PV of future minus cost of project, right? Profitability index, the acronym is PI. PI is equal to PV of future divided by cost of project, and using the first equation, PV of future is equal to NPV plus cost of project. Hence, PI is equal to NPV over cost of project plus 1. So how much money do you make in present value terms per dollar invested plus 1? That's what PI is. PI decision rule for standalone, accept the project if PI is greater than 1, which basically means PI and NPV will result in exactly the same decisions for standalone projects. PI and NPV would give the same decision. And for standalone projects with conventional cash flows, NPV, IRR, and PI would give the same decision. Because if the project is conventional, IRR is going to be greater than the discount rate if and only if NPV is positive. So NPV greater than 0 if and only if IRR is greater than discount rate. Guys, if you want to converse about stuff, you can do that outside. Please, if you want to converse about stuff that's not related to class, outside is available for you. because your friends are here, I'm hoping, to listen to me. And NPV is greater than 0 if and only if PI is greater than 1. This first statement is under conventional cash flows. The second statement is not conditional on anything. And if you remember from your logic, if and only if means both sides. If NPV is greater than 0, PI is greater than 1. If PI is greater than 1, NPV is greater than 0. It means they're basically, mathematically speaking, the same condition. For mutually exclusive, PI rule says pick the project with the highest PI, provided it would have been acceptable as a standalone. If all the projects have profitability index of less than 1, don't accept any one of them. Again, PI does not know about the scale of the project, hence could result in decisions that conflict with NPV when projects are mutually exclusive. In terms of the information it carries other than the actual value, PI is about essentially per dollar invested how much money you'll be making in the future. When there are constraints on capital, the amount that you can raise, either by equity or by debt, capital must be rationed. And PI would be useful. Maybe go with the projects with the highest PI first and go from there. But if there's no limit, if you can afford all 3 projects, provided they were acceptable, then, select all 3. Again, template is simple. Just read it off, okay? It's right there. There is one more thing I'm going to talk about, then I'm going to let you guys go. It's kind of an overload of all sorts of concepts. I want you to read chapter 8 before you come next Monday, because there is some stuff that are descriptive in nature I haven't covered here, but they could still come up in the quizzes. What to do when, even for standalone, cash flows are not conventional. Are we going to give up the idea of on IRR? IRR is ill-defined due to multiple solutions. Hence, we will modify the cash flows to make them conventional and then calculate the IRR for the modified cash flows. Your book talks about 3 different ways you can do this, but there is one that I prefer. Calculate the PV of any negative cash flows in the future and add those to the cost of capital, cost of project, I'm sorry, and make the cash flows in negative years 0. So take those negatives and make that year 0, add the present value of that negative to the cost of project. This is what we do here. I mean, the way I do it, it basically says add the present values if the cash flow is negative. It's using the function SUMIF. Again, it's something that you don't have to know, but if you're interested in different ways of manipulating things, it's very useful. So think about this. Let me make this, let me put a negative number here. These are basically the modified cash flows. Year 5 became negative, and present value of year 5 was 14,186. That is added to the cost of the project. That modified cash flow is conventional. Remember, 0 is allowed, but you can't have negatives in the future. That means if I calculate an IRR for those modified cash flows, it's guaranteed to have a unique solution. Because that's the theorem. If all the cash flows are conventional, there exists one and only one solution to that equation that defines IRR, which means it's a unique solution. Or a solution exists and it's unique. This IRR calculated for the modified cash flows is called the modified internal rate of return. Or MER. Excel has a function called MER. Don't worry about that. It doesn't go through the same logic we're going through, but they should be very similar. Again, MER rule is the same, except the project if modified internal rate of return is greater than discount rate. Again, this is for standalone. For mutually exclusive, same idea, except the one that has the highest modified internal rate of return, as long as that is acceptable by itself. So let's look at this one. The IRR itself is 2402, but modified internal rate of return is 22. If all the cash flows are conventional, they're going to be exactly the same. And if you want to see that there are other solutions